So trichlorethylene is this very simple six atom molecule. Many of you are familiar with water that's called H2O, or which consists of 3 atoms, 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom. So trichlorethylene is just 6 atoms. Was created in 1864, and we've been using it since 1920. So think about it. We're using a chemical from the 1920s, which is shortly after when Henry Ford developed the Model T, and shortly after when Oliver and Wilbur Wright flew their first airplane. None of us would be flying in an airplane from the 1920s, and few of us would ride in a car from the 1920s because we rely on engineers to develop safer alternatives. If engineers can develop safer means of transportation, I submit to you that chemists can develop safer chemicals, because trichlorethylene is a dangerous chemical. It has been used to decaffeinate coffee, to degrease metal, and to dry clean clothes. In the 1970s, 600 million pounds of this chemical were used per year, more than 2 pounds per American in the 1970s, and found in everything from typewriter correction fluid to decaffeinated coffee. As I mentioned earlier, it's associated with a 500% increased risk of developing Parkinson's disease. And like smoking and lung cancer, you don't smoke a cigarette and develop lung cancer the next day. There's a lag in the study between 10 to 40 years between the time you're exposed to this chemical and your development or diagnosis of Parkinson's disease. And my colleagues, Dr. Caroline Tanner and Sam Goldman, who are now at University of California, San Francisco, noted that because of TCE's widespread use, that the potential public health implications of their findings are substantial. What's really clear is that TCE causes cancer. According to the World Health Organization, TCE is carcinogenic to humans. According to the Environmental Protection Agency, TCE is carcinogenic in humans by all routes of exposure. So what cancers are really linked to Parkinson's disease? To TCE. I'll give you 5. 1 is liver cancer, kidney cancer, sometimes called renal cell carcinoma, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, prostate cancer, and multiple myeloma. Those are just 5 for which the evidence is most robust. There's other studies that have linked it to breast cancer, including dozens of male Marines who worked at the contaminated base Camp Lejeune had developed breast cancer and brain cancer in some reports. And many of us have worked with this chemical, and many of us have been exposed to it and don't even know it. These are just some of the occupations that are linked, that are associated with TCE exposure, including aircraft and jet engine mechanics, anyone working in the automobile industry, dry cleaners, embalmers, oil processors, painters and printers, shoemakers, taxidermists, weapons specialists, and varnish workers. And its list of commercial uses is long. This is a partial list: adhesives, carpet cleaners, cleaning wipes, degreasers, film cleaners, glue, gun cleaner, inks, lubricants, pesticides, refrigerants, typewriter correction fluid. And its industry uses are even or similarly long. TCE was so widely used, it was actually used to anesthetize patients, especially to provide pain relief to pregnant women. This is a courtesy of a colleague, Dr. Victor Polshuk, who introduced me to this. And this is a quote from one of the leading journals of obstetrics and gynecology from 1956. Trilene, or trichlorethylene, is a potent analgesic drug. Its margin of safety and ease of administration will ultimately make it a standard agent on all delivery floors. Trilene's wide variety of uses will probably allow almost every obstetrician to find a place for it in its obstetrical practice. And so it was widely used, especially for pregnant women, until the FDA banned this use in 1977. But other uses of TCE are still permitted today. It contaminates over half of the most toxic Superfund sites throughout the United States. And so you can find likely a Superfund site near where you live or have lived. And you don't need to have worked with a TCE to have been exposed to it. TCE contaminates up to 30% of groundwater in the United States, is very frequently released into the atmosphere as well. And when it contaminates groundwater, it can form underground rivers or plumes that can migrate away from a contaminated site. So if the contaminated site is either an industrial site, a military base, especially an Air Force base, or a dry cleaner who's inappropriately disposed of the chemical, or it's leaked from sewage lines, the TCE gets into the soil and groundwater. And just like how radon evaporates from the soil and can enter your home and cause lung cancer, TCE can do exactly the same thing. So many of you have had your homes tested for radon to make sure that your basement, for example, doesn't have high levels of radon. TCE can evaporate from underlying contaminated soil or groundwater into your home, your workplace, or your school, and do so without you even knowing it. And it could have done so 10 years ago, could have done so 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, and you never knew about it. The poster child for the contamination of drinking water is the Marine base Camp Lejeune in North Carolina. It's one of the largest Marine bases in the country. And from the 1950s into the 1980s, its drinking water was contaminated by TCE at levels that were more than 3,000 times that which are safe, and was contaminated with many other chemicals. And it's led to countless suffering. It's led to miscarriages, babies born with significant birth defects, a cemetery just off the base that's filled with babies who died with congenital abnormalities. It's caused male breast cancer, as I alluded to earlier, caused scores of people, probably hundreds, maybe thousands of people to have cancer, and is associated with an increased risk of Parkinson's disease. But these contaminated sites are everywhere. Michigan likely has thousands. This is a contaminated site in Michigan from an automobile manufacturer where TCE dissolved into the groundwater and formed this underground plume or river. And you can see this underground plume or river travels miles away from the initial contaminated site. So if you live on top of this or go to work on top of this plume, or have your children going to school on top of this plume, they could be breathing in the pollutant TCE and not even know it. There are numerous sites in New York State where I live. Last year, I visited 5 Superfund sites contaminated with TCE in just 3 days. And I thought when I would go to a Superfund site that I would see, hazmat suits or fences or danger signs everywhere. But I didn't, and you don't in general. This is a picture of a Superfund site in Nassau, New York, which is a beautiful, idyllic town in upstate New York. And you can see there's nothing around there to notify people of the dangers that are likely inherent with a Superfund site. In fact, I saw a little girl bicycling on a bicycle right near this Superfund site in Nassau, New York. Just where I live in Rochester, New York, there are more than a dozen dry cleaners that are known to be contaminated with trichlorethylene or its related chemical perchlorethylene, PCE. 3 of them are about 10 minutes from where I live in suburban Rochester, and a few of them are located about 10 minutes from where I'm sitting right now at the University of Rochester. And these sites are found everywhere. Some of you might remember either the book or the movie A Civil Action in the 1990s starring John Travolta, which highlighted how TCE contaminated drinking water in Woburn, Massachusetts, leading children there to develop leukemia. Many of them died. Dan Fagan wrote a Pulitzer Prize-winning book called Tom's River, describing the contamination of a town in New Jersey, also with TCE, again leading to cancers among children in that community. The good news is that TCE, just like radon, is really readily addressable. So this process by which TCE gets into the groundwater and evaporates into people's homes, schools, and workplaces is called vapor intrusion, and it's remediable. Some of you even have had radon found in your basements and have had radon remediation systems put in. Those radon remediation systems are very similar to what's used for TCE. And what you essentially do is you have a pump that pumps out the air from below your house's foundation and sucks all the TCE out and vents it above your roof, where it can be readily diluted into the atmosphere. And this is a picture of Ms. Jane Horton, who lives near a Superfund site in Mountain View, California, one that was contaminated with the chemicals that were used at Intel and Fairchild Semiconductor. She had her indoor air tested, found to have elevated levels of TCE, had a remediation system put in, and now boasts that she has the cleanest air in her home of all of Mountain View, California.